Wrong Turn is a movie that sits near and dear to my heart. Even though it has probably one of the most downward spiraling franchises in all of horror history. When I was 9 years old, my mom used to take me to Walmart and would always let me pick out a movie from the cheap bargain bin or the shelf, and I usually went for horror because I'm a badass. Don't get me wrong, usually I would grab something that had like a cheap, cheesy cover, but when I ran into Wrong Turn around Christmas of 2003, I did not depict the horror that was going to entrench me. I didn't realize this movie was going to spook me as bad as it did. I mean, keep in mind it was 2003, I was 9 years old. So let's talk about Wrong Turn, and specifically the part that scared me the most, the three brothers, the Odets. The Odets? I'm going to pronounce it how I want. Welcome back to Phantom of the Indie Review. It's your boy, Reddy. And while we talk about some nostalgic spooks, I'm here to remind you that I am on my quest for 3,000 subscribers, and I'm almost there. So if you want to be a part of the journey, come here. I have a story to tell. Because this shit is gonna be dope, dude. This channel's about to pop off, so don't be a bandwagoner. Come before that shit's fresh off the press. Writer Alan B. Elroy, who worked on scripts such as Halloween 4 and even Spawn, came up with the idea for this movie when he was actually on a drive with his wife. Him and his wife were forced to detour on a rural side road during a snowstorm. He says, as we were doing that in the dark in a snowstorm, we were thinking, is this a smart idea? Special effects makeup artist Stan Winston, the legend, you know and love him. He was signed on as producer with his elite work on Jurassic Park, Terminator, Edward Scissorhands, and even winning Academy Awards for Aliens. I remember specifically as a kid on the bonus feature, there was this one snippet where Stan Winston was talking and he said, with Wrong Turn, he wanted to do for the woods what Jaws did with the water and just terrify people from going camping. Which I'm pretty sure, like, again, this movie is heavily inspired by 70s cult horror, so, I mean, in a way that was already a stereotype and stipulation, but the man's meant well. During the time of filming, Fox reportedly had trouble securing an R rating for the MPAA due to the film's intense violence. With many of the TV spots for the film also being refused approval, this is possibly one of the reasons why subsequent Wrong Turn movies were released straight to video, because, you know, you make a horror movie in the early 2000s, they try to ban it or censor it or give it an unrealistic rating, and maybe this one, even though it did decently well, the sequels to follow got sent to the Walmart bargain bin. Now we look at movies set in West Virginia in the mountains as a very cliche prospect, but in the early 2000s, it really wasn't. With the interesting backstory of hillbillies and cannibals, Wrong Turn kind of catapulted that cliche into the horror industry. Don't get me wrong, there has always been a huge exaggeration in Appalachian culture of hillbillies and outsiders being monstrous and cannibalistic. With writers such as Mary Noailles Murphy and John Fox Jr., who traveled across Appalachia looking for local color and overstated the degree to which mountain populations lived in isolation. During the same time period, missionaries reported persuasive ignorance and poverty, with large families living together in ramshackle cabins. The notion of widespread inbreeding was at least in part of the result of crude assumptions about how these isolated forest people might have been perpetuating their own communities. So when Wrong Turn came out in 2003, a huge part of that scary, creepy rumor about Appalachian families and inbreeding and creatures in the woods, all that lore was because of this movie. Well, at least reiterated into my generation. The premise follows. Medical student Chris Flynn drives through the mountains of West Virginia on his way to a business meeting. He stops at a gas station to ask directions, and the elderly owner named Maynard is of no help. Chris finds a map and decides to go down Bear Mountain Road. He collides with a stopped car whose tires have been punctured. The car belongs to a group of college students on a camping trip: Jesse, Carly, Scott, Evan, and Francine. They soon discover that their tire puncture was no accident. They find barbed wire wrapped around it and realize that someone did it intentionally. I remember as a kid, this movie genuinely terrified me. I mean, something about the woods, taking a back road. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in New Hampshire, a very wooded area, and something about things lurking off in the woods disturbed me. So to make a slasher based off some cannibalistic entities, I thought was genius. From the intense, creepy woodland backdrop of West Virginia, to the deformity of the deranged cannibals and how specifically eerie they were. Most specifically, the one that creeped me out was the head of the pack, Three Fingers, with his diabolical laugh. I remember every time he did that little thing, it just sent shivers on my spine. Three Fingers being pretty much the face of the franchise for the Odet family. But who is the Odet family? The Odet family is the central antagonist that make up the three brothers, Three Fingers, One Eye, and Sawtooth, even though throughout the sequels, family and lore expands. Not as drastic as you want, they try their best. The Odet family begins when Maynard Odet was born on May 2nd, 1951 to unknown parents, and it is unknown what his life was like until he married a woman named Delilah, who was heavily implied to have been his sister. Maynard, the creepy dude at the beginning of the Wrong Turn 1, genius because you know that he knows something about these mutants, I guess, these inbred hillbillies, but it's very subtle, and that's what I love about early 2000 movies. It's subtle. You kind of have to figure out for yourself that he knows, and let alone, not only does he know, drinking his Pepto-Bismol, tauntingly, he is the father of the three. Together, they have 5 children: Pa, Ma, Sawtooth, One-Eyed, and Three Finger, who are heavily deformed due to a combination of incest and exposure to radioactive toxic waste inside barrels next to an old sawmill. I mean, I don't understand radioactive stuff in West Virginia. I mean, I'm not a historian of that area. Maybe that's accurate. Maybe I should have done some research. Maybe I can.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
All of their children are also born with congenital analgesia, a disease that causes an inability to feel any kind of physical pain. See, that's actually kind of interesting. I did not know that. The fact that they have kind of like birth defect that's a blessing and a curse that kind of makes them invincible until they get killed is actually kind of fascinating, and it makes it more scarier to know that you can't really just beat them and run away. At some unknown time later, Delilah dies from unknown causes. Maynard raises his children by himself until Ma and Pa have children of their own, sister and brother. Maynard leaves his family to go on a crime spree in which he kills an unknown person and gets sent to prison for it, but later escapes. There's more about them throughout the franchise, but this episode I'm specifically talking about Wrong Turn 1. I can deep dive later, but this movie is near and dear to my heart. When we first meet the three brothers in Wrong Turn 2003, it's chilling, like how they hunt, how they orchestrate and run through the forest. They know it like the back of their hands. It's essentially their backyard. The forest is bizarre and unnerving, but this is one of those franchises that's just as wild as it comes along, for better or worse. Odets were a very interesting group of characters with how creepy and murderous they were. Their dichotomy, how they don't really talk, they just grunt. And they're very barbaric and uncivilized, but very smart. I mean, they outsmart these young adults who have all this technology at their hands, and they outsmart them and pick them off one by one, and I think that's something that you could call more terrifying than most things. Really liking the character Scott, played by Jeremy Sisto. Him and his relationship with Carly was very endearing, and the fact that he kind of sacrifices himself to save Carly and the friends is very noble of him. That one scene where they are in the junkyard always sent chills down my spine for whatever reason. I also find it fascinating that 2 characters that get picked off pretty early in this movie, played by Lindy Booth and Kevin Zegers, are both in the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. I wonder how that happened. Did they see Wrong Turn and be like, I want those both in this movie? Or were they just up-and-coming horror actors that just got to be in another movie together? I just always thought that was cool. I remember piecing that together as a young, and I was like, whoa. But yeah, there's so much to talk about this franchise, and I want to do that more, but I need your guys' help. If you want me to do a follow-up on the sequel, or maybe talk about the entire franchise following the first one as a whole, I'm going to need y'all to subscribe. Specifically like this video. If we can get to 30 likes, am I cheap? I'll do it. But yeah, did this movie scare you as a kid? How old were you when you watched it? Did you find very little interest in it? Is it just run-of-the-mill? Or do you just have a good time watching it? Alright guys, that is the video, so subscribe, give me a thumber, hit that little ding-a-ling button harassing you, telling you, hey, it's me, I'm here. I'm gonna say it 1 time for the 1 time and 2 time for the ohs. Give me a hell yeah for horror. Y'all the one who gone in, hey, yeah.
Gotta stay close to my youngins.